You wake up, and before your eyes open, your first breath of the day has already gone in and out, without you deciding a single thing about it. That breath was shallow, fast, and pulled through your mouth, and it set a chemical signal that will follow you until noon. So here is the plain answer to what your lungs should receive first every morning. Not oxygen, and not caffeine-fed adrenaline, but a slow, quiet flood of your own carbon dioxide, held long enough to reset a tolerance switch that has been slipping for years. That sounds backwards, I know. You've been told your whole life that oxygen is the prize and carbon dioxide is the waste. And that single misunderstanding is why most people breathe in a way that keeps them mildly anxious from the moment they open their eyes. Here's the thing the oxygen story leaves out. Your blood is already almost completely saturated with oxygen right now, around 97 to 99%, sitting in a pulse oximeter's normal range, even while you sleep. You are not short of oxygen. You have never, in ordinary life, been short of oxygen. What controls whether that oxygen actually leaves your blood and enters your muscles and your brain is a gas you were taught to fear, carbon dioxide, and the amount of it your body will tolerate before it panics you into a gasp is a number that has been quietly shrinking every year you've spent breathing too fast. So what is the first thing your lungs should receive? A gentle, deliberate underbreathing, less air than you think you need, for the first 2 minutes after waking, done through the nose, on the edge of a mild air hunger. That's the whole headline. If you do only that and close this, you've got something real. But the reason it works is stranger than the instruction, and if you don't understand the reason, you'll do it the way almost everyone does. Too hard, too fast, chasing the wrong sensation, and you'll get the opposite of what you came for. Let me show you the machine underneath, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. There is a small cluster of cells at the base of your brainstem called the central chemoreceptors, sitting on the surface of the medulla, and they do one job. They taste your blood. Not for oxygen, for carbon dioxide, measured indirectly through the acidity it creates. When carbon dioxide rises, your blood turns slightly more acidic, the pH drops a few hundredths of a point, and those cells fire an alarm. Breathe, now. That alarm is the entire sensation of being out of breath. It has almost nothing to do with running low on oxygen, and almost everything to do with a rising tide of CO2 your brain refuses to let cross a certain line. Now why does that line move? Why is a fit 50-year-old sometimes gasping on the stairs while a calm one climbs them talking? Because that alarm line is trained the way your ears train to a loud room until you stop noticing the noise. Breathe fast and shallow for years, mouth open, chest heaving, sighing through the day, and you keep flushing carbon dioxide out faster than your body makes it. Your blood CO2 sits chronically low, and those chemoreceptors, living in a low CO2 world day after day, recalibrate. They get twitchy. They start firing the breathe now alarm at a CO2 level that should have been comfortable. Which raises the harder question. If the alarm goes off too early, what does the rest of your body do in response? It clamps down. Here is the part that reorganizes everything. There's a phenomenon in blood chemistry called the Bohr effect, described by the Danish physiologist Christian Bohr in 1904. The father, as it happens, of the physicist Niels Bohr. The Bohr effect says something that sounds like a paradox. Hemoglobin, the protein in your red blood cells that carries oxygen, only releases that oxygen willingly when carbon dioxide is present. CO2 is the key that unlocks the cargo. Picture a delivery truck full of oxygen driving through your bloodstream, every door locked. Carbon dioxide is the hand that opens the doors at each stop. Flush your CO2 too low, and the doors stay shut. The truck drives past your starving tissues fully loaded, oxygen still on board, and delivers almost nothing. Read that again slowly. You can be breathing hard, blood fully oxygenated, and still starving your brain of the oxygen it needs, because you blew off the very gas that releases it. The gasping makes it worse. The more you overbreathe in a panic, the tighter the doors close. This is why some people feel foggy and lightheaded precisely when they're breathing the most. And this is where the morning matters more than any other hour. When you sleep, your breathing naturally slows and your CO2 drifts up. That's healthy. That's the body's own reset happening in the dark. But the instant you wake, your cortisol awakening response kicks in. Cortisol, the hormone that pulls you out of sleep, peaks within 30 to 45 minutes of your eyes opening, and it raises your breathing rate along with your heart rate. So the first thing most people do with their lungs is overbreathe on a cortisol wave, dumping the CO2 they carefully built overnight, resetting the alarm to its most sensitive position before they've even had water. You start the day by making yourself less tolerant, more anxious, more prone to that shallow chest breathing that feeds the whole cycle again. So the first thing your lungs should receive isn't more, it's less, on purpose, before cortisol writes the day's setting. Let me give you the drill exactly, because precision is the whole thing here. Stay lying down or sit up against the headboard. Don't stand yet. Close your mouth. Breathe in through your nose softly for about 4 seconds, and softly is the instruction that matters, because you are not filling your lungs, you're just topping them off. Then let the air fall out on its own for 6 seconds. No push, no force, like a balloon losing pressure through a pinhole. At the bottom of that exhale, pause. Hold empty for 2 or 3 seconds until you feel the very first gentle pull of wanting air. Not desperation, not struggle, just the polite first knock of air hunger. Then breathe in softly again and repeat. Do this for 2 minutes. That mild, tolerable hunger you feel, that is carbon dioxide rising back to where it belongs, and it is the exact sensation retraining your chemoreceptors to stop crying wolf. If that mild hunger feeling was new to you, the idea that you're supposed to welcome it, not flee it, hit like. It's the single clearest signal that tells the algorithm to show this to someone else who's been breathing scared every morning without a name for it. Now, what should it feel like if you're doing it right, and what does it mean if it doesn't? Done right, after about 90 seconds you feel a warmth, maybe a slight flush in the face, your shoulders drop, and the urge to yawn or take one big breath appears. Resist that big breath, let it pass. That warmth is real, it's blood vessels dilating. Because carbon dioxide is also a vasodilator, it widens your arteries, including the ones feeding your brain. Overbreathe and blow off CO2, and cerebral blood flow can drop by 30 to 40% within a minute. That's the lightheadedness of a panic breath. Slow down, let CO2 rise, and the vessels open again. The warmth in your cheeks is the doors of the delivery truck swinging open all through your head. If instead you feel dizzy, jittery, or your heart races, you're forcing it. You're holding too long and then gasping, which spikes and crashes the gas instead of nudging it. The drill is boring when it's working. If it feels dramatic, you're doing the dramatic version, and the dramatic version trains nothing. So why does nasal breathing matter so much here, and not just the pace? Because your nose is not a passive tube. Inside your nasal passages and sinuses, the tissue continuously produces nitric oxide, a gas that the 1998 Nobel Prize in Medicine was awarded for understanding, when Louis Ignarro and 2 colleagues showed it relaxes and widens blood vessels. When you breathe through your nose, you carry that nitric oxide down into your lungs on every inhale, where it opens the small airways and improves the match between the air you bring in and the blood waiting to receive it. Breathe through your mouth and you skip the factory entirely. You get colder, drier, unconditioned air, and none of the chemical that would have helped it land. So the instruction isn't nose breathing for its own sake, it's that the nose adds a second gas to the first breath, and you want both working the morning shift. Which brings me to a comparison worth making honestly, because there's a competing morning ritual everyone loves. Cold water on the face, or a cold shower first thing. It does something real. The cold triggers the diving reflex through the trigeminal nerve in your face, slows your heart, and can genuinely calm you. But watch what people do in a cold shower. They gasp. They hyperventilate. They blow off carbon dioxide in exactly the pattern that sensitizes the alarm. The cold calms the nervous system through one door, while the panicked breathing sabotages it through another. If you're going to do cold, breathe slow through your nose while you do it. That's the version that actually stacks. The one where you shriek and hyperventilate is mostly training your CO2 tolerance downward at 6 in the morning. Here's a fair objection, and I want to be straight about it. You may have read that we breathe at twice the healthy rate, or that most people are chronic overbreathers, sometimes with a specific figure attached. A normal breathing rate supposedly being half of what the average adult does. That claim gets repeated constantly in breathing circles, and I'd rather be honest with you, the tidy numbers there are softer than they're presented. Resting breathing rate varies a lot between healthy people, and the everyone overbreathes by exactly double framing was tightened up in the retelling well past what the underlying measurements support. The mechanism is solid. CO2 tolerance is trainable. The Bohr effect is textbook physiology. Chemoreceptors do adapt. But if someone hands you a single clean multiplier for how much the whole population overbreathes, treat that number with a raised eyebrow. The direction is right. The precision is invented. If that distinction just landed for you, the difference between a real mechanism and an inflated number wrapped around it, and there's a layer coming in a moment about what this does to your heart rhythm that surprised me more than anything else here. Subscribe now, because that part is a couple of minutes away, and it's the reason I kept digging into this, instead of leaving it as a breathing tip. So what does slow morning breathing do beyond the lungs and the brain? It reaches your heart, through a nerve most people have heard named and never had explained. The vagus nerve, the 10th cranial nerve, the longest of the wandering nerves, running from your brainstem down through your chest and into your gut, is the main cable of your parasympathetic system, the branch that slows things down and lets you rest and digest. And here is the elegant part. The vagus nerve talks to your heart primarily on the exhale. When you breathe out slowly, the vagus fires and your heart rate dips slightly. When you breathe in, it eases off and your heart rate rises slightly. That gentle rise and fall with the breath has a name: respiratory sinus arrhythmia. And despite the word arrhythmia, it is a sign of a healthy, responsive heart, not a broken one. Now stretch that exhale out to 6 seconds, the way the drill asks, and you deliberately lengthen the vagal firing on every breath. Do it at roughly 6 breaths a minute, and you hit something researchers call the resonance frequency, a breathing pace, right around 5 to 6 breaths per minute, where the natural rhythm of your heart rate and the rhythm of your blood pressure waves line up and amplify each other, like pushing a swing at exactly the right moment, so a small push moves it far. At that pace, the swing of your heart rate variability grows to its maximum, and heart rate variability, the tiny beat-to-beat variation in the gaps between heartbeats, is one of the better single markers we have of how much reserve your nervous system is carrying that day. So the same slow morning breath that retrains your CO2 alarm is also, in the same 2 minutes, tuning your heart's rhythm to its resonant sweet spot and lifting the one number that tracks your stress reserve. One drill. 3 systems. The chemoreceptors in your brainstem, the Bohr doors on your hemoglobin, the vagal brake on your heart, all reach through the length of a single exhale. Let me put the whole thing in one picture you can carry. Think of your breathing system as a house thermostat set slightly wrong. For years it's been reading the room as too warm and blasting the air conditioning, flushing out CO2, keeping you cold and clenched. The gasping for oxygen story tells you the fix is a bigger air conditioner. It isn't. The fix is to walk over and reset the thermostat itself, patiently, so it stops overreacting to a temperature that was never actually a problem. 2 minutes of slow, slightly hungry nasal breathing each morning is your hand on that dial. You're not adding power, you're correcting a setting. And there's a recognition here I'd bet lands for a lot of you. Have you ever woken up already anxious? Heart a little fast, chest a little tight? No bad dream to blame, no reason you can name. Just a low hum of unease before the day has done anything to you? I'd bet most of you have felt exactly that, and never once connected it to how you were breathing in your sleep, and in those first waking minutes. I'm genuinely curious whether I'm right. That morning unease is often not psychological in origin at all. It's chemical. It's a CO2 alarm set too tight, going off on a cortisol wave, telling a perfectly safe brain that something is wrong. The thoughts come after, to explain a feeling the body manufactured first. There's an honest uncertainty I owe you here too. How much of chronic morning anxiety is truly driven by breathing chemistry versus other things? Sleep quality, blood sugar dropping overnight, life simply being heavy, is not fully settled, and anyone who tells you breathing alone fixes anxiety is overselling it. What the evidence supports more firmly is narrower. Slow breathing at around 6 breaths a minute reliably shifts the nervous system toward calm in the moment and, practiced daily, appears to nudge baseline measures like heart rate variability over weeks. Whether it permanently resets your CO2 set point for everyone or how long that takes is thinner ground. I'd put it at weeks of daily practice before the morning feels different, based on how chemoreceptor adaptation tends to work. But I want you to hold that as a reasonable expectation, not a promise. So how do you know it's actually working over time, not just in the moment? There's a simple, free measurement: One breath hold test used in these circles as a rough gauge of CO2 tolerance. After a normal exhale, breathing calmly, you time how long until the first real urge to breathe. Not how long you can white-knuckle it. The first genuine urge. A very sensitive alarm gives you a short number. That first knock comes fast. As your tolerance improves over weeks, the same test lets you go noticeably longer before the knock arrives, because your chemoreceptors have stopped panicking at a normal CO2 level. It's a rough measure, not a medical one, and I won't pretend the specific second counts floating around online mean as much as they're claimed to. But watching your own number drift longer over a month tells you the setting is moving. Here's a thought that stays with me. We spend fortunes on what we put into our bodies, the supplements, the powders, the cold plunges, the devices, and the single most influential input, the one that runs 20,000 times a day and touches your brain's blood flow, your heart's rhythm, and your baseline sense of safety, costs nothing and needs no equipment. It's just the pace and the path of your air, and almost nobody was ever taught that the pace could be wrong, or that the wrongness could be corrected, or that the correction should happen first thing, before cortisol locks in the day's setting. There's one more layer that genuinely changed how I think about this. The way you breathe in those first waking minutes doesn't just set the next hour. Breathing is one of the few automatic systems you can consciously override. You can't will your kidneys or your liver, but you can, right now, take command of your breath. And every time you do the slow morning drill, you're not just moving gas. You're demonstrating to your own nervous system, at the moment it's most impressionable, that the person in charge is calm. The body reads the breath as evidence. Slow air says the environment is safe. Fast air says run. You are, in effect, casting the first vote of the day on whether you're in danger, and your whole physiology tends to follow the way you voted. So tomorrow, before your feet touch the floor, before the phone, before the coffee, give your lungs the first thing they should actually receive. 2 minutes of slow, quiet, slightly hungry nasal breathing. Exhale longer than the inhale, riding the mild air hunger like it's a friend and not a threat. That's it. Free, invisible, and running underneath everything else you'll do today. Tell me in the comments, when you first tried holding to that gentle air hunger, did it feel calming or did it make you want to gasp? Be honest, because the split between those two answers tells me exactly where each of you is starting from. And share this with one person you know who wakes up wired for no reason they can name. The one who's tense before the day has earned it. You were never short of air. You were only breathing like you were.